Jeanette's prepared a short statement she's going to read to you today. Jeanette's prepared a short statement she's going to read to you today. We have not had a lot of time to review all the information, and so she's got a prepared statement. She's not going to be doing any Q&A today, but she will be back here tomorrow to answer any questions and give you the time that you need. So again, thank you so much for being here, and we'll go ahead and let her do her statement.
Thank you. The news conference held earlier today in Bend, Oregon, to release the report of the investigation regarding my husband's death was to be expected. No surprises. The purpose of that announcement was for the state and federal agencies to continue to lay the foundation for their legal case. However, they have brought forward selective evidence. As in all such situations, there is another side to the story. We will provide a more thorough analysis of a follow-up news conference tomorrow, and we'll be taking questions at that time. According to an AP wire from Portland, Oregon, officials investigating the death of Robert Lavoy Finicum are ready to release results of the fatal shooting during a January 26th traffic stop while trying to arrest the rancher and others involved in the takeover of an Oregon wildlife refuge. However, the FBI video shows this was not a typical traffic stop. It was an ambush involving a roadblock on a blind curve along a lonely stretch of highway, a dead man's blockade, a kill stop, which is illegal. The AP continues. The FBI said Finicum was shot after reaching for a gun. We reject that statement. The FBI's aerial video was of poor quality, edited, and provided no audio. Our family asserts that he was shot with both hands up, and he was not reaching for anything at the time of the first shot. He was walking with his hands in the air, a symbol of surrender. When he reached down to his left, he was reaching to the pain of having been shot. I can hardly believe that a team of qualified law enforcement officers could look at the facts of this case and say that no criminal laws were violated. How could they have reached this decision in the face of evidence that clearly shows intent to kill my husband? We have talked with an independent investigator who has stated that the video provides a setup assassination. Many people, including my lawyers, have tried to prepare me for this. Be strong. Accept this with peace. But I do not think anything could prepare me to accept what is so clearly a finding that challenges the Constitution my husband died defending. I know that under the Constitution, the men who shot my husband to death while he was surrendering are entitled to due process of law, but they are not entitled to walk free and not have to face the same legal process that is a barrier to you or to me. They shot my husband. They left him lying in a snowbank with no medical assistance, no charges, no arrangements, no preliminary hearing, no indictment, no trial by a jury. And should they just walk free? It's just not right. The consolation I have had from thousands of Americans that have seen and know the truth, and I believe that, as I do, that my husband was murdered intentionally and deliberately and with malice. My lawyer has assured me that we will seek justice in a different court under different circumstances, and I look forward to the day when these men do face a jury that is unbiased enough to return a fair verdict. After the funeral, rallies spontaneously began to organize in many states. The organizers counted possibly as many as 1,000 rallies took place throughout the country in every state but Rhode Island. It has been asked how this movement got such momentum so quickly. When Americans heard the details of this story and how these American patriots who have no criminal record and who have stood on the same interpretation of the U.S. Constitution as Justice Scalia have been treated, the actions of law enforcement and the FBI have shocked the conscience. Our Supreme Court has set as the standard guideline for practices of law enforcement that are unacceptable to our society as those that shock the conscience. A dead man's blockade with the intent to kill shocks the conscience. Shooting to kill with both hands up shocks the conscience. Violating the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment by placing Americans with no criminal record who are apparently guilty of defending the U.S. Constitution and the overreach of federal authorities into solitary confinement and then removing their constitutional right to bear arms are two examples of how elected and appointed officials in our court system, legislative body, and in the law enforcement are violating the rule of law. The Supreme Court has referred to solitary confinement as being violently insane. The court has recognized that solitary confinement tortures our human brain and diminishes our God-given strength to overcome obstacles. Solitary confinement is a form of torture that often drives the incarcerated mad. Last year, a Supreme Court justice wrote a concurring opinion that described the history of solitary confinement, saying the practice bears a peculiar mark of infamy in its ability to shatter the minds and spirits of their prisoners. Who are we? We are outraged that men and women who have no criminal records and who pose no threat during the protest in Oregon are being treated as mere animals. The American people are outraged at this inhumanity, this brutality, this barbarism by the courts and law enforcement. It has created a new American awakening from both the left and the right. It shocks our conscience, and that is why around 1,000 rallies spontaneously organized in support of my husband's assassination and these patriots who are being held as political prisoners. Again, my lawyer has assured me that we will seek justice in a different court under different circumstances. And we will be commenting on the FBI and the Duchamp County press release tomorrow after we review their findings. Thank you so very much for coming. Thank you.
So what are the plans for tomorrow?
No,
Who's this from? The FBI?
Yes. Chutes County Sheriff said that these extra shots that I guess were not known about previously were fired by FBI, but here in this release, it's referred to as by law enforcement. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction to the entire situation is we weren't given the full truth at that initial FBI press conference after the shooting. They selectively released information to the public. They gave us the aerial video. They made certain representations to the public, and they were incomplete and incorrect. And this is why transparency in government is so important, because when the FBI attempts to basically inflame and prejudice the public over a political protest by selectively releasing information, that's something that should appall everyone on the far left to the far right. Because if they're doing it for a bunch of ranchers, imagine what they're going to do to Black Lives Matter or to environmental protesters. Anybody that the government disagrees with, they're all at risk. This case is bigger than just what happened to the Hammonds.
So does this sound like a cover-up to you?
Well, there's an allegation that there's a cover-up, and you know, I've been in this business long enough to know that, you know, allegations are allegations. You know, words are wind. I grew up in Parkville, Missouri, the show me state. So, you know, show me the cover-up, show me the evidence, show me the information. Don't tell me about it. Show it to me.
How do you see what happened today affecting Ammon Bundy's case?
Well, if there's truly a FBI cover-up, and then the FBI knew that the cover-up was happening, and the FBI continued to investigate the political protest at the refuge, then that's a problem. Recall in court, I requested to have an escort there during the investigation by an investigator employed by our office. That was declined. So, I mean, why did they resist that? And these are questions that need to be answered. So what we have is a bunch of folks protesting the government, then the government investigating the government protesters, and then the government accused of covering up the investigation of the government protesters, and then the government investigating their own cover-up in the investigation of the government protesters. That is shocking and unbelievable. I would prefer if state government was investigating the FBI. I prefer that an outside agency was.
Instead of the DOJ.
Instead of the DOJ. I mean, the DOJ is prosecuting my client. The DOJ is prosecuting political protesters right now, and now they're going to go investigate the cover-up of the investigation of the political protesters that they're prosecuting.
So you're worried about a conflict there?
Well, there's an absolute conflict. I mean, justice can't be served unless we have sunlight shine on the process by independent investigators, which is why we asked to be present when they processed evidence. We weren't allowed to be there. And, you know, we have a political protest that was done live on YouTube. You know, the sunlight was shining in. They were there to educate. They were there to make political statements, you know, for better or for worse, whatever you you know, whether you agree or disagree. They were there talking. They were there educating. And they did it under largely under a microscope. They weren't hiding from anyone. And now the FBI is investigating this very sunlit protest under the cover of darkness. I can't speak for, you know, I don't have any military training. I've spoken to military folks that have discussed the placement of the roadblock, you know, the topography, and you know, when someone would be able to see it. And there's some allegations of military tactics that were involved in that. What I find most troubling about the investigation, about what was uncovered, is there was a shot fired at the initial stop before Mr. Finicum fled. It was purported to be a less than lethal round, a 40 millimeter less than lethal pepper spray round, shot into the canopy of Finicum's truck. Finicum, as a driver of that truck, would not know it was a less than lethal round. He would know or perceive, he could have perceived that he was unlawfully being fired upon by law enforcement. Under state law, under State versus Oliphant, a citizen is allowed to respond to unlawful force by the government with force of their own, assuming they reasonably believe that that's being used. For instance, in Oregon, in the Ruby Ridge case, when Ms. Weaver was shot holding her infant, in Oregon, Mr. Weaver could have fired back because that was unlawful use of force. He was acquitted, of course, in a court of law on that issue. He didn't use force, but I'm just using that as an example. And I use that as an example because that's the example that the protesters use all the time. And they use the example of Ruby Ridge and Waco as why they made certain statements the way they did, because they didn't want unlawful force to be used against them. And under state law, considering that it's lawful to respond to unlawful force with force of your own, we have to look and see what was going on in Mr. Finicum's head. He gets fired upon, he flees, he comes around the corner, he gets shot at, he tries to go around it, he gets shot at again, he gets out of the vehicle. Had Mr. Finicum shot at law enforcement and survived, we would be asking the question, or a jury would be asked this question, did he reasonably believe that force was being unlawful? And therefore, was he justified in reaching for a gun? Of course, I haven't seen a video of an FBI agent walking up to his dead body and opening his jacket and pulling out the Ruger 9mm. I look forward to receiving that in discovery. But what I find troubling about the allegations of the FBI shots being fired is that we were misled at that original press conference that the FBI conducted. That was a calculated move. The Attorney General Lynch coming to Oregon and speaking about the protests recently was a calculated move. And the only thing that a defendant like Ammon Bundy has is his word and his attorney on his side. And that's why it's important for him to use both of those to speak out about government injustice and lack of transparency in government investigations.
How does this change what you do and how Ammon Bundy's case is going to go going forward?
Well, I mean, it's going to change things in a lot of ways. For one, I am having deep regrets in ignoring and marginalizing some of the conspiracy theories that have been told to me by witnesses at the scene, witnesses in Harney County. You know, coming from my background, you know, like I said, I'm a conservative Democrat in Lane County, grew up in the Show Me State. I typically look at those things skeptically and I take it with a grain of salt. So now I'm going to go back over my notes and look into the allegations of FBI cover-up a little more detailed. Yeah,
what are some of those theories you're going to have to go back and revisit?
Well, I mean, I'm just those are issues that were brought up to me, and I can't confirm that the veracity of them. It's just work that we're going to have to do. I mean, that's part of the investigation. When Ammon Bundy has set us out on a mission of truth-seeking, we know the FBI is picking sides, and they're not acting as truth seekers in Mr. Bundy's opinion, and that's what we're going to attempt to show at court. So we're stuck in that role, and so it's going to be very lengthy and expensive, and and it's a shame that while he's presumed innocent, he's incarcerated while my investigation is ongoing.
And Mr. Bundy has not heard about this yet.
No, he's on lockdown until 1 o'clock. So that's the problem with being in jail while you're presumed innocent, is information flows to you very slowly. Obviously, there's allegations about an FBI cover-up, and that's going to have to be investigated. And one thing that's inherently flawed with all investigations into criminal conduct is that we have to trust the investigators to do the investigating. And in modern times, we expect to see head cameras, body cameras on all parts of that investigation, to all conversations of that investigation, to know if there is actually bias going on, if there's mishandling of evidence going on, or God forbid, a cover-up of part of the investigation. So these are questions that are going to have to be answered. When I learned about this, I was sitting in my office. I got a text message about an article on the Oregonian, because I actually didn't watch the press conference because I was meeting with my client at the time. We had got off the phone with him. We got the article, and I was physically appalled at what I read. I mean, I was shocked, and just as a citizen to learn those allegations by the government, who we're supposed to trust to do investigations. We're supposed to trust, and now we got the government investigating themselves, and I didn't even know what to think about that. I would like to, essentially get the keys to the investigation and go out there and grab up all the information I can and learn what actually happened. And if I could sit down with the FBI right now, I would encourage them to be transparent. I would encourage them not to be afraid of the truth, even if it makes them look bad. Because the worst thing about any wrongdoing is always the cover-up. We've learned that time and time again. Presidents have taught us that lesson at least twice. I mean, probably more than that. And it's time for the government to stop acting as a marketing company and start acting like a truth teller. I think the most important thing to take away from this whole situation is, no matter what you believe in regarding the propriety of their protest, when someone is protesting and when it's reacted to the way it was reacted to by the government, it puts all our liberties in jeopardy. I don't care if you're Julia Butterfly, in a tree living, or you chain yourself to a tree to protest a logging operation. We expect the government to conduct themselves professionally and honestly. And if either one of those are called into question, the system breaks down. And that's why we have defense lawyers, that's why we have the discovery process, and thank God that's why we have juries.
Spectrum Internet is the fastest you can